We all have gifts to offer the world, but finding your gifts and realizing your gifts can be a very enormous journey. It can also be a little bit tricky. So in this video, I'm going to be giving you 5 things that are going to help you to find what these gifts are and to be ready to offer them to the world. My name is Adam. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Before we get started, I just want to let you know I'm doing a couple more free breakthrough calls, and then that's probably going to be it for a while. There's a link pinned in the comment section below. A breakthrough call is just a 30-minute call where we get on Zoom, and I help you just troubleshoot like where in your life you're blocked or resistant from stepping into your power and aligning with your highest vision. So all of us want to feel like the best version of ourselves. All of us want to be good at stuff. All of us want to have something to offer. In fact, if we don't feel like we have this, that really is the sole cause on some level for depression and anxiety and the negative emotions. It's not feeling worthy and deserving of our own inherent love and ability, and also feeling like we don't have a place. Now, the journey to discovering your gifts and offering them can be a lifelong process, as there's always more that we can learn about ourselves. There's always skills that we can further develop, new ones we can take on. But I find that people tend to get really stuck when it comes to this particular area. I know it's been something that has kind of haunted and tormented me, to be a little bit dark, for my entire life. And I've had all these questions around like, well, can I actually do these things as well as I feel like I can? Am I delusional? Do I just think I can because in other lives I could? Or am I telling myself that I could in other lives just so I can feel like the person I want to be? What's the answer? I've always felt like I've had these abilities, but they've been buried. And before I get into the 5 things, I feel like this is something kind of common and not often talked about. I've kind of come up with 3 different categories when it comes to abilities. I think 1, there are people that just naturally have things. And they just kind of come into the life like this is what you're meant to offer the world. It doesn't mean they don't have to work for it, but they just have a natural propensity towards something very early on. So we might call these people, phenoms. Somebody like Beethoven or Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant. Even though Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant both worked their asses off beyond the level of work most people do, they still had some exceptional skill. And it showed pretty early. Like Bill Hicks is an example of this as a comic. By the time he was like 16, 17 years old, he had audiences like rolling on the floor laughing. I mean, most kids at that age aren't that developed when it comes to stand-up comedy. It takes many more years than that, but he was just here to do that, and the gift was front and center. Then there are people, I think, I don't really want to say this, but I think it's true. We all have our limitations, and there are certain things that we just kind of don't have as much. Now we can develop them, right? But it may just not be your calling, so to speak. This is a tricky thing to discern, because a lot of times we err on the side of thinking we're capable of less than we are, but there are things that maybe we want to do at a certain level that no matter how hard we work, we're just not quite going to get there because it's not meant for us. You can break it down into like zone of genius, zone of excellence, zone of competence, and zone of incompetence. Some things fall in your zone of incompetence. Then the third group, I feel like, is where many of us land. And that's, you have skills, you have talents, you have gifts, you have abilities, but you kind of gotta dig to find them, or you have to really work to develop them. And I'm not saying like Michael Jordan worked his ass off, okay, but you have to work in a way where maybe for many years you don't get much of a result. And you might fall into this category on the fence like I've had, where it's like, can I do this or not? Is it that I just need to keep working on it, or is this one of those things that isn't meant for me? Okay, so before I get into the 5 things, the first thing I want to say about that is it's hard to know that. And I would say if you have a deep calling in your heart and you love it, you're meant to do it. You're meant to do it. You're meant to pursue it. Now, whether you're meant to do it full time for money and to be like the world's greatest genius and acknowledged for it, that may be a different story. But if you have that calling, always listen to it. Okay, so 5 things that you need to know or have. 1 is self-acceptance. Our gifts are born from love. Your gifts are always going to develop better, work better, shine more when you're in a state of love. And the thing that prevents us from offering our gifts or honing them to the highest level is fear, attachment, self-hatred, judgment, criticism. Now, obviously these things take a while to get to work through, and it doesn't mean you'll ever get all the way through them. It's not something to let you stop. Don't ever let that stop you, because most of the greatest artists and accomplished creatives in the world are always racked with self-doubt and self-hatred and judgment on some level. Okay, you can heal that a lot, but don't wait. But the more you can be in a loving space with yourself and just kind of let yourself go on your process step by step, and when things don't go the way you want them to, you just back off and you give yourself grace and you give yourself, permission to let yourself off the hook, the easier and the better it's going to be. The more you're going to develop them, the more you're going to find them, and the more they're just going to come through you, because the gifts we have come from beyond us, really. They come from the divine, they come from your higher self, and in order to channel them, you want to just be like an open vessel. The second thing you need is experimentation. The willingness to experiment and the willingness to fail. When you're developing anything, the safer you play it, the longer it takes. Oftentimes, if we're good at something, we kind of want the recognition of being good at it, so we'll avoid like taking bigger risks and kind of stay in that safe zone at what we know we're kind of good at, but that will prevent us from expanding the gift, developing it, and having it reach its full potential, or like an echelon beyond what we thought. Also, if you're not really sure exactly what your gifts are, experimentation. Try different things when they call to you. See what you're good at, what you have a knack for. See what feedback you get when you do a particular thing. See how it feels. Life is just an endless experimentation process. Developing skills requires experimentation, because then you see what works, you see what doesn't work, you see what you like, you see what you don't like. You find things within you didn't know you had, and your gifts will start to show themselves. The third thing is discernment. And this is I kind of talked a little bit about it already. This is a very important part of finding and developing your gifts. Because you may have something that you know you're good at, but you may not know exactly the best way it's called to express itself. Because often we just have this feeling that like, oh, I like to do this and I'm good at this, and we may be right, and then we have a picture of what that would look like. And the picture is usually not exactly correct, but it contains the essence of what's correct. Like an example would be, maybe you love speaking. You're a great speaker. And you're pursuing a career speaking online. Maybe you're pursuing a career doing YouTube or TikTok or, whatever it is. And it's going all right, but it's not quite working. Now you might say, well, I just need to be a little more persistent and keep going. And that could be true. And it's hard to really know when it is or it isn't. Or it may be that what you're really called to do is to speak in person. So you're right that you're meant to be a speaker. You're right that you're a great speaker. But until you start speaking more in person, the doors aren't really going to open for you. And the thing there is, maybe when you start speaking in person, your online speaking will pick up too, because you've stepped really into the alignment of your greatest, expression of self. But you really want to kind of look at, like, a lot of times to find the bullseye, it's not a major pivot in a completely other direction. Sometimes it is. It's different for everybody, depending on what we're talking about. But a lot of times it's just a subtle tweak. It's like you're on the right path, but you need to go that way just a little bit. So look, if something's not working and you feel called to it, look at how you can adjust it. And again, you can experiment with what works and what doesn't work to see what adjustments to make. Discernment is very important. Also, honesty with yourself. The fourth thing that you need is patience. Because finding your gifts, developing your gifts requires a whole lot of patience. Often things take a lot longer than we want them to. They're a lot more difficult than we think they're going to be, or than they even maybe should be. We feel like called and pulled to this version of ourselves, and we feel like we're right there. This is how it's been for me for like decades. I'm always right there, but the reflection doesn't quite kick over into, where I really want it to be. And some of that can be an illusion, but some of it's true. Sometimes there is like a moment where you kind of cross a threshold and it's like, okay, now this is going the way I always felt. But we often don't know what it is that's in the way, or how much is in the way, or what it is we need to work through, or what it is we need to learn, to what extent to really align with those gifts, or to hone them all the way. And so we can go through these periods of like constantly being disappointed with the way we feel internally and the expectation we have, and the way the external is matching with that expectation. And so there's a lot of disappointment that can come, and this is why it's important to have self-acceptance, self-love, let yourself off the hook, and also to just know that it requires time. But if you feel called, if you feel deeply called, you just keep going. Persistence, that's another one. Definitely persistence. Probably the most important one. And then the last one for today that you really need to find and hone your gifts is the willingness to feel uncomfortable over and over and over again. And nobody likes that. None of us like to feel uncomfortable, but that is the absolute price that we all have to pay for greatness, to be our best self. And when you have a lot of self-acceptance, it makes the discomfort much easier, because so much, if really not all of the discomfort, comes from our own judgment of ourselves. But to some extent, anytime you're stepping into something unknown that's new, it just feels kind of uncomfortable to the human being. And in order to really achieve the essence of what your highest potential is, you're going to be asked to take risks. You have to take risks. You have to when you're working out in a gym, it's always those extra couple of reps that really hurt that make you stronger. To say that's not just a physical muscle, it's a mental muscle, an emotional muscle, a spiritual muscle. It's those extra few steps that you don't think you can take that push you into a new threshold. Now, that doesn't mean be hard on yourself. It doesn't mean hurt yourself or burn yourself out. It's just knowing that the discomfort is good. The discomfort is breaking down the fear, the resistance, the judgment of yourself that's preventing the greatest aspects of your soul, your higher self, from expressing themselves and being received by the world. And the last thing to know is you probably have an inclination or an impulse or an idea of what your gifts are. And whatever that is, it's what you're here to do. It's whatever kind of makes your heart open, is what you're here to do on some level. And the best advice I've heard is, this was from Bashar, it's from a lot of different people. Do what you're passionate about consistently, but with no insistence on the outcome, no attachment to the outcome, and no attachment or insistence on the time frame. You just do it day by day by day, because it's not even in the end about who receives your gifts. It's ultimately, it's not even about that. I mean, it kind of is, but it's really more, we're all in a classroom by ourselves, evolving and expanding. So at the end of the day, it's about who you become in your journey to develop yourself. And that is the service you have to offer others. Just you becoming the best you is what inspires other people, but it's not your obligation to inspire them. It's something that just naturally happens. So I hope that helps. Please let me know if you have any questions, revelations, breakthroughs. I always love to hear from you. Thank you so much to everybody who watched this video. I always very much appreciate everyone who supports me. And other than that, until next time, I look forward to it. Bye-bye.